We'll cover more detail about those in the workshop, but I just wanted to introduce one very basic type of pathway analysis called pathway enrichment analysis, and then I will tell you more about some background information that's important for just understanding how these types of analyses work. So a standard pathway enrichment analysis considers a list of genes from your experiment, for instance, all the genes that are downregulated in a brain cancer cell line, and that's represented by this blue circle. And then we compare this blue circle, the genes in this blue circle, with known pathways. So we might have a list of genes that are associated with a pathway called neurotransmitter signaling. This might have 100 genes in it, and we ask the question, what's the overlap of the neurotransmitter genes with my list? And you calculate some overlap, and then given the information about all the genes in your list and the size of this overlap, you can compute a p-value using a standard statistical test like a chi-square test or a Fisher's exact test. And you're wondering if there are more neurotransmitter signaling genes in this case in my list than I would expect by chance, given the size of the neurotransmitter signaling pathway and the size of the genome. So if the neurotransmitter signaling pathway is only 1% of the genome, and I see 5% of my genes in my gene list are part of the neurotransmitter signaling pathway, that's more than I expect. And I can calculate a p-value for that. So we do this with many pathways. So we test neurotransmitter signaling and then hundreds or thousands of other pathways. Once we're done, we need to do some multiple testing correction because we want to avoid false discovery from just trying many pathways. And in the end, we might develop some kind of hypothesis that drug sensitivity in brain cancer is related to reduced neurotransmitter signaling. So pathway enrichment analysis, as I've described it, requires two things: the gene list that you provide from your experiment, and also a set of pathways which have to come from a database. And we compare these two and we find enriched pathways, for instance, using techniques such as GSCA and gProfiler. So to understand some background information about pathway enrichment analysis, I'm going to tell you about gene identifiers, which you need to understand to help understand how gene lists work. And I'll also talk about places where we get pathway information and other gene annotation, like the gene ontology and other sources. So first I'll talk about the gene list. So a gene list is a list of genes, and the important concept to understand is that a list of genes is not just a list of names, but it's a list of unique identifiers that allow us to understand unambiguously what genes we're talking about. Identifiers, or IDs, are ideally unique, stable names or numbers that help track database records. For instance, a social insurance number or an Entree gene ID. Gene and protein information is stored in many different databases, and thus genes have many different identifiers. There are records for genes, DNA, RNA, and protein, so each gene might have different corresponding record in a database of DNA sequences or RNA sequences, and each of those records in those databases would have, or entries in those databases would have a different identifier associated with it. So it's important to recognize the correct record type or entry type. For instance, the Entree gene database doesn't store information about sequence. They link to sequence in other databases where you might have DNA regions, RNA transcripts, or protein sequences. For instance, in the RefSeq database, which does store sequence. So it's important to know that, as I mentioned, that you need to use some standard identifier if you want to unambiguously have other systems like pathway analysis methods understand your genes. You can't just use colloquial names for genes, as they just won't be recognized. Some common identifiers, there are many, are listed here. The red ones are ones that are frequently encountered. Entree gene that I bolded here is one that we recommend because it's quite stable. We also have species-specific information. For instance, for human, there's a Human Genome Naming Commission from the Human Genome Organization, and it standardizes gene symbols, which are different from gene names. So a gene symbol, again, is an identifier, which means that it's globally unique, and it should be unambiguous, which means that there shouldn't be two genes with the same name. This is not the case for regular gene names that you might see in the literature. Similarly, other organisms have other standard gene naming systems associated with them. So there are many different identifiers, and sometimes we need to work with them, for instance, to convert one to the other. You might have entree gene IDs that are useful for pathway analysis methods, but you want to see the list as gene symbols, which are more easy to read. There are software tools that recognize these identifiers, although not every tool recognizes every identifier, and you may need to map your gene list identifiers to some standard identifiers or between two different sets, as I've mentioned. So there's different reasons to do this identifier mapping. The main one is converting database name numbers like integers that are associated with entree gene ID to human readable names, or to convert between these when you need to input your gene list into a tool that only recognizes some of these. One example identifier mapping service, which is quite useful, is called gconvert at this URL. So you can input some genes or official names or identifiers, and you can choose the type of output identifier from a very long list. And when you click run, it will say that these genes are also called this name or this identifier in a given database. I selected entree gene, I selected ensemble genes as my target database here. So gconvert is a useful tool for mapping identifiers if you need it. You have to be aware of ambiguous or missing identifier mappings. So here I entered OCT4 DDT and H3 F3A. So OCT4 is not recognized. This may not be an official gene symbol, even though it's a well-known gene name, and actually that's correct. It is not an official gene symbol. So if you use this, it will not be recognized by tools that only recognize official gene symbols. The DDT gene is mapped to two different genes on the genome, and if you look at the description, you can see that one is the real gene that we might think of that's well known. Another gene is a novel protein that is some kind of read-through through this open reading frame, and so it probably is duplicated because of uncertain genome annotation in that region of the genome. Here's another example, H3F3A, which is a histone, a type of histone, and this one gene corresponds to two different proteins or two different gene names. This one gene symbol corresponds to two different names and two different genes, and it's very closely related histones. So sometimes you might see this, and these might be linked because perhaps they have identical protein sequences. Or they might have identical gene sequences, but have slightly different promoters, for instance. So when you're working with identifiers like long lists of genes, you have to be aware that there are some challenges, and you need to be very careful to avoid errors. So you always have to make sure that you're working with correct identifiers and that you map these correctly, because if you make a mistake, then instead of thinking you'll have one gene, you'll actually have another gene in your list, and that will enter into your analyses and then be wrong. So I mentioned gene name ambiguity. If you have so all of these names are names of the official gene symbol TP53. You should never use any of these because they're not good identifiers. And some of these terms might point to more than one gene, and you can make mistakes in your gene list if you use them. There's also errors that are frequently introduced by spreadsheets like Excel. So OCT, for example, that I mentioned, if you have that in your list, is changed frequently to October 4. You've probably seen this if you've worked with Excel a lot and gene names. There's a lot of different gene names that automatically get converted to dates. And the way to avoid this is to paste as text or to select the format of the cells that you paste to as text, not general. So you might have problems reaching 100% because of some of these challenges. So you might also have different database versions that might not recognize 100% of the genes that you have in your list. And so you could, if you want to reach 100% coverage, do additional work using multiple sources of gene identifiers to increase coverage, and you might have to do some of that work manually. Gene name errors are widespread in the scientific literature. There's a paper about that, an interesting paper, and there's also an interesting paper trying to quantify the problem with mistaken identifiers and how gene name errors can be introduced when using Excel and bioinformatics. Just to give you a bit of a warning of the importance of this, here's an example that was quite unfortunate, where a paper was published in Nature in 2003 that proposed that HES1 is a target of a given microRNA, and what they found was that the gene termed human homologue of HES1 is not the same as the transcriptional repressor hairy enhancer of split, which is also called HES1. So when they did all of their searching for HES1, they didn't realize that there's two genes both called HES1, and they made a mistake, and actually it resulted in completely wrong information in their paper and a retraction. So general recommendations with working with gene lists for proteins and genes is to map everything to Entree gene IDs or official gene symbols using a spreadsheet to make sure it's all working correctly. If you want to reach 100% coverage, you might need to manually curate missing mappings using multiple resources, and be very careful of Excel auto conversions, especially when you're pasting a large gene list, because when you paste a large gene list, you don't see all of the conversions that are happening off screen. So it's important to make sure that you are careful to remember to format cells as text before pasting, or paste as text. This assumes that you're working with proteins and genes. It doesn't, and it recommends to map everything to genes. And the reason for this is that the era of genomics and all of the pathway analysis methods that we'll cover in this course, and pretty much all of them that exist, don't consider splice forms. So they don't differentiate between two different forms of a gene. At the protein level, they're obviously different, and they could have totally different functions. At the gene level, we don't know that because we just refer to them as a given gene. And unfortunately, currently, most tools just work at the gene level. And so it's important to understand that that protein-specific or isoform-specific information is not captured by the majority of tools. So what have we learned in this section? Genes and products have attributes, and attributes have many identifiers. Genomics often requires some understanding of these identifiers and potentially conversion from one type to another. There are useful identifier mapping services available, and whenever you can, use standard commonly used identifiers to reduce ID mapping challenges in your workflow.